The first time I saw Lieutenant Kira Mendez, she was arguing with a vending machine. Not exactly the introduction I expected to the human who would later reduce 3 Vraxian battlecruisers to scrap metal using what our records classified as obsolete technology. But there she was, in the observation deck of the Galactic Coalition Station 17, having what appeared to be a deeply personal conversation with an automated beverage dispenser. "Come on, you metal bastard," she muttered, smacking the side of the machine with her palm. "I put in the credits. You owe me a coffee." I approached cautiously. Humans had only been part of the coalition for 6 standard cycles, and their reputation preceded them. Unpredictable, creative, dangerously stubborn. The kind of species that looked at a problem, ignored all established solutions, and somehow made things work anyway. "Lieutenant Mendez?" I asked, my translator converting my native Quilorian clicks into something approximating her language. She turned, and I got my first good look at her. Shorter than average for her species, with dark hair pulled back in what humans called a ponytail, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in approximately 2 seconds. There was a grease stain on her uniform collar. "That's me. You must be Commander Veltrax." She stuck out her hand, another bizarre human custom I had researched. I extended my primary manipulator, and she gripped it firmly. "They told me you'd be my liaison for this assignment." "Assignment?" I tilted my head, confusion rippling through my chromatophores. "There must be some mistake. I was informed you were here for equipment decommissioning duty." Her smile could only be described as predatory. "Yeah, about that. Turns out your coalition has a whole warehouse full of broken combat drones gathering dust. Someone figured a human engineer might find them, quote, interesting." Interesting was one word for it. The combat drones she referenced, Mark 7 autonomous combat units, had been a failed experiment from 12 cycles ago. Temperamental power cores, unstable targeting systems, and a nasty habit of shutting down mid-combat. We had lost 40 good soldiers before scrapping the entire program. 300 units sat in storage, too expensive to properly dispose of, too dangerous to deploy. "Those drones are non-functional," I said carefully. "Multiple species attempted repairs. All failed." "Good thing I'm not multiple species, then." She finally got her coffee from the machine with one last percussive maintenance strike. "I'm human. We specialize in making garbage work." That should have been my first warning. The warehouse was exactly as depressing as I remembered. Row after row of Mark 7 units, each one a monument to failed coalition engineering. The drones stood 3 meters tall, vaguely humanoid in shape, with articulated limbs designed for both mobility and weapons operation. In theory, they represented the future of coalition combat forces. In practice, they represented a massive budget overrun and several demoted engineers. Mendez walked among them like a general inspecting troops, running her hands over plasma scoring and battle damage. She stopped at one unit that looked particularly pathetic, missing an entire arm and sporting a crack across its optical sensor array. "This one," she said. "That one is the most damaged unit in the entire facility," I protested. "Surely, if you insist on this foolishness, you should start with something more intact." "Nah, if I can fix this poor bastard, I can fix anything." She pulled out a small device from her pocket, some kind of human scanning tool. "Besides, I like a challenge. What happened to it?" I accessed the records through my neural link. Combat engagement against Vraxian raiders, Sector 49 Alpha. Direct plasma hit to the primary processor. Secondary hit severed the left manipulator assembly. Unit experienced cascade failure and had to be recovered from the battlefield. "Vraxian raiders, huh?" Something shifted in her expression. Those the same guys who hit the supply convoy last month? Killed 16 coalition personnel? Yes, they are becoming increasingly bold. I did not mention that 12 of those 16 had been Quilorian, my own people, that we had families waiting for them, that the coalition seemed more interested in trade negotiations than actual protection. Mendez was quiet for a moment, still staring at the broken drone. Then she rolled up her sleeves. Literally. Right. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to fix this thing. Then I'm going to fix a dozen more. And then we're going to have a conversation about field testing. Field testing is not authorized for Mark 7 units, I said, though even I could hear the lack of conviction in my voice. She grinned at me. Commander, I've spent the last 3 years of my life working on Earth's disaster response drones. Do you know what makes a good disaster response drone? I shook my head. Something that absolutely will not quit, no matter how bad things get. Something that can take a beating and keep going. Something that doesn't need perfect conditions to function. She patted the broken drone's intact shoulder. Your coalition engineers built these things to be perfect. That was their mistake. I'm going to rebuild this one to be stubborn. Over the next 4 weeks, I learned several important things about humans. First, they do not sleep on any reasonable schedule. I would arrive at the warehouse in the morning to find Mendez already there, surrounded by components and drinking that horrific coffee. I would leave in the evening with her still working, muttering to herself, and occasionally cursing in 3 different Earth languages. Second, they have a disturbing relationship with safety protocols. I stopped counting the number of times I saw her bypass security interlocks, reroute power systems in ways that made my scanner scream, warnings, or test volatile equipment without proper shielding. "Relax," she said once, while holding an active plasma core in her bare hands. "I know what I'm doing." The temperature of that core exceeds 400 degrees standard. Yeah, but see, I'm not actually touching the hot part. There's a containment field. You just can't see it, because I modified the housing. She winked at me. Trust me, I've done stupider things. Third, and perhaps most importantly, humans talk to inanimate objects like they are alive. Mendez had named the drone. She called it Crash, apparently after some Earth military tradition I did not fully understand. "Morning, Crash," she would say, entering the warehouse. "Ready to get that new actuator installed?" I pointed out that the drone could not hear her. She pointed out that she did not care. But despite the chaos, despite the safety violations that would have gotten any coalition engineer court-martialed, despite the sheer insanity of her methods, something remarkable happened. The drone started working. Not perfectly, not elegantly, but it worked. She had ripped out the original power core, replacing it with what she called a hybrid system that combined 3 different technologies in a way that should have been impossible. The targeting computer now ran on modified software she had written herself, code that looked like chaos, but somehow produced better accuracy than the original. The damaged arm had been rebuilt using parts from 4 different drone models, held together with welds that made proper engineers weep, and a stabilization system Mendez had apparently improvised from cargo loader components. "It's not pretty," she admitted, running diagnostics on her handiwork. "But pretty doesn't win fights. Functional wins fights." "The power efficiency is 30% below standard specifications," I observed, reviewing the data. "Yeah, but the actual power output is 40% above standard specifications." "I'll take that trade." She input another command sequence. "Watch this." The drone, Crash, moved. Not the stilted mechanical movements I remembered from the original Mark 7s. This was fluid, almost organic. It raised its mismatched arms, rotated its torso, and executed a combat stance that would have looked appropriate on any coalition Marine. Then it spoke. "Combat systems online. Awaiting orders, boss." I nearly fell off my observation platform. "You gave it conversational protocols? That was not part of the original design." "Original design was boring," Mendez said. "Besides, if I'm sending this thing into combat, I want to know its thinking. The conversational AI helps me debug its decision-making process." "Affirmative," Crash added. "Current decision-making process indicates 97% probability of mission success for all projected scenarios." "Show off," Mendez muttered, but she was smiling. That night, over drinks in the station cantina, I made the mistake of asking her why she cared so much. "I mean, no offense," I said carefully, "but this is not your fight. The Vraxian raiders target Coalition supply lines, Coalition stations. Earth is far from these conflicts. You could return home, work on projects that benefit your own people." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her glass. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. "My brother was a combat engineer. Marines. Good guy, you know? Always trying to fix things, make things better." She took a drink. "He died because his equipment failed. Shoddy contractor work, corners cut for profits. He called in for evac, and the drone that was supposed to extract him had a faulty power core. Just stopped working. Middle of a firefight. I am sorry for your loss." "Yeah, me too." She looked up at me, and her eyes were hard. "I joined the military after that, specialized in combat systems, made it my mission to build things that don't quit, that don't fail when people are counting on them. Your coalition reminds me a lot of those contractors back home. Good at making things that look impressive, not so good at making things that work when it matters." "We have different priorities," I said defensively. "The coalition values proven methods, established protocols. The coalition is losing." She said it bluntly, without malice. Just fact. "Those Vraxian raiders are running circles around your response teams. Your proven methods aren't working. Maybe it's time to try something unproven." Before I could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. We ran to the command center, Mendez somehow keeping pace despite her shorter legs. The holographic display showed what every coalition officer dreaded. 3 Vraxian battlecruisers dropping out of hyperspace, weapons already charging. "All defense platforms online," Station Commander Drexith was ordering, his tentacles rigid with stress. "Get me firing solutions immediately." "Defense platforms charging," a technician reported. 30 seconds to full readiness." "They are launching fighter craft," another voice called out. "Count is 48. No, 63 hostile fighters inbound. Impact in 90 seconds. I watched the tactical display with growing horror. Station 17 was a supply depot, not a military installation. We had defenses, but they were designed to deter pirates and small raiding parties. 3 battlecruisers represented overwhelming force. "We should evacuate," I said quietly. "Negative," Drexith snapped. "This station contains 6 months of supplies for the entire sector. If the Vraxians take it, thousands will suffer. We hold." "We cannot hold," I insisted. "Commander, please." Mendez had been silent, studying the display with intensity. Now she spoke up. "How many Mark 7 units do we have capable of basic mobility?" Drexith turned to her, confusion replacing fear for just a moment. "What? Lieutenant? This is hardly the time for your project." "Answer the question, sir." "How many?" I accessed the records. 18. if we include units with degraded systems. Crash is fully operational, Mendez said, already moving toward the door. If I can get those other units running on local control, even with reduced capability, that gives us 19 combat drones. Not enough to stop battlecruisers, but maybe enough to handle their fighter screen. Those drones were declared non-functional, Drexith protested. By coalition standards, yeah. But I'm not coalition. She was already running. Commander Veltrax, with me. I need someone who knows coalition command protocols. I looked at Drexith. He looked at the tactical display, at the approaching death, and made a choice, I suspect, haunted him. Do it, he said. All resources at your disposal. We have nothing to lose. The warehouse had never seemed so vast. 18 broken drones stood like monuments to failure, and we had less than 90 seconds to turn them into something useful. I cannot activate these units, I protested, running diagnostics. The power cores are unstable, the targeting systems are offline, and we lack time for proper repairs. We don't need proper repairs. Mendez was at her workstation, fingers flying over the interface. Crash, you online? Affirmative, boss, detecting multiple hostile signatures approaching the station. Good. I'm uploading a command protocol to all inactive Mark 7 units. It's going to bypass their safety systems, run them on emergency power, and slave their targeting to your processor. You'll be controlling all 19 drones like extensions of your own body. Can you handle that? There was a pause that felt like eternity. Processing. This protocol violates 14 safety regulations and will likely result in permanent damage to the inactive units. Will it work? Another pause. Then, and I swear, there was something like humor in the synthetic voice. Affirmative, boss. It will absolutely work. Uploading now. The warehouse came alive. 18 drones that had not moved in cycles suddenly activated, their optical sensors glowing with emergency power. They moved jerkily, like puppets on strings. But they moved. All units online, Crash reported. Combat effectiveness at 62% due to damaged systems. Recommendation: accept losses to maximize damage to enemy forces. Negative, Mendez said firmly. Your primary objective is station defense. Secondary objective is your own survival. I want all 19 of you back here when this is done. Understood? Understood, boss. Deploying now. Through the command center cameras, we watched them go. 19 broken, jury-rigged, technically non-functional combat drones launching themselves into space to face 63 Vraxian fighters and 3 battlecruisers. It should have been suicide. Instead, it was art. Crash and its siblings, its extensions, whatever they were, moved through the void like a single organism. They did not fight like coalition, forces with careful formations and coordinated volleys. They fought like humans, with aggression and improvisation and a complete disregard for what should have been possible. A Vraxian fighter would line up a shot, and suddenly 3 drones would be firing from unexpected angles, their degraded targeting systems somehow finding weak points in the fighter's shields. A battlecruiser would launch a missile barrage, and the drones would scatter in patterns that defied tactical algorithms, only to reform and strike at the missile launchers themselves. They are using the debris field, a technician breathed in amazement. They are grabbing destroyed fighters and using them as shields. Crash just ripped a weapon pod off an enemy fighter and is now using it, another voice reported, somewhere between horror and admiration. I watched Mendez's face as she monitored the battle. She was not celebrating. Her expression was focused, intense, occasionally barking orders into the comm system. Crash, your 3rd unit just took a direct hit. Power core is failing. Acknowledged. Rerouting to ramming trajectory. Enemy fighter destroyed. Unit 3 is no longer functional. Damn it! Priorities, people! I want those battlecruisers' attention on anything except this station. And they got it. The Vraxian forces, confronted with enemies that should not exist, using tactics that made no sense, began to falter. They focused fire on the drones, which meant they were not firing on the station. Our defense platforms came online, adding their fire to the chaos. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the Vraxian forces were in full retreat. All 3 battlecruisers had sustained heavy damage. Their fighter screen was decimated. Station 17 stood intact, shields holding at 40%, with minor damage to outer sections. Of the 19 drones Mendez had sent into that hell, 7 returned. Crash walked back into the warehouse under its own power, dragging 2 damaged siblings, with 4 others limping behind in various states of disrepair. "Mission accomplished, boss," it said simply. "Station is secure. Requesting permission to begin repairs." Mendez did not answer immediately. She walked to each returning drone, examining damage, running her hands over plasma scoring and impact craters. When she reached Crash, she leaned her forehead against its chest plate. "You did good," she whispered. "All of you did so good." Then she straightened, wiped her eyes, and became the engineer again. "Right. Let's get you all patched up. Commander Veltrax, I'm going to need more parts, and access to those other 200 Mark 7s you've got in storage." "You want to repair more units?" I asked, still processing what I had witnessed. She looked at me with an expression I was learning to recognize. Determination mixed with that peculiar human quality that refused to acknowledge impossibility. "Commander, I just proved these drones work. More importantly, I proved they can win. Now, I'm going to build an army." She smiled, and it was terrifying. Those Vraxian raiders just picked a fight with someone who really, really hates things that don't work. Time to show them what happens when a human decides to fix a problem. The Coalition High Command arrived 3 days later, and they were not happy. "You deployed unauthorized combat units during an active engagement without proper clearance, without adequate testing protocols, and without following established chain of command procedures." Admiral Corthan loomed over Mendez, all 4 of his eye stalks focused on her, with obvious displeasure. "Lieutenant, you could face court-martial for this recklessness." Mendez stood at attention in the conference room, flanked by myself and Station Commander Drexith. She had showered, changed into a fresh uniform, but there were still grease stains under her fingernails. I had learned she wore them like medals. "With respect, Admiral, my recklessness saved this station and everyone on it," she said calmly. "And unless Coalition regulations have changed in the last 72 hours, I believe the defense of Coalition assets takes priority over paperwork." Corthan's eye stalks quivered with irritation. "The Mark 7 program was terminated for excellent reasons. Those machines are unstable, unpredictable, and fundamentally flawed." "We're flawed," Mendez corrected. "Past tense. I fixed them." "You modified Coalition military equipment without authorization." "Actually, Admiral, if I may interject." I stepped forward, holding a data tablet. According to Section 14 of the Coalition Emergency Powers Act, any officer may utilize available resources in defense of Coalition lives when immediate threat supersedes standard operational procedures. Lieutenant Mendez acted within established guidelines. I had spent 2 sleepless nights researching those guidelines. Humans were not the only species capable of stubborn determination. Corthan glared at me. "Commander Veltrax, your career is also at risk here. I would advise caution." My career is already at risk, sir. I am Quilorian. My homeworld contributes 0.03% to the coalition economy. We have no political power, minimal military presence, and our opinions carry approximately zero weight in high command decisions. I met his gaze steadily. Which means I have nothing to lose by telling you the truth. Lieutenant Mendez gave us a victory when your established protocols could only offer evacuation. Perhaps it is time to acknowledge that different does not mean wrong. The silence in the room could have been cut with a plasma blade. Finally, Drexith spoke up. The lieutenant has requested permission to fully repair and deploy the remaining Mark 7 units. I am inclined to grant that permission. You cannot be serious, Corthan sputtered. I am extremely serious, Admiral. The Vraxian raiders will return. They always do. Next time, I would prefer to greet them with something more substantial than harsh language and hopes. Drexith pulled up a holographic display showing the battle footage. Look at this. Really look. Those drones fought with coordination and tactical awareness beyond anything the original Mark 7 specifications promised. If Lieutenant Mendez can replicate this across multiple units, we would have a defensive capability this sector has never possessed. Corthan watched the footage, his eye stalks tracking the movements of Crash and its siblings as they tore through the Vraxian formation. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Military officers, regardless of species, recognized effectiveness when they saw it. One test deployment, he said finally. You will repair 12 additional units. They will undergo full coalition combat trials. If they fail any parameter, this entire project terminates immediately. If they succeed, he paused, choosing his words carefully. If they succeed, we will discuss broader implementation. But Lieutenant Mendez, you will follow proper protocols. No more improvisation without oversight. Mendez's smile was small but genuine. Yes, sir. Proper protocols. Absolutely. The Admiral did not look convinced, but he nodded and left the room, his entourage following. Once they were gone, Drexith turned to Mendez. You have no intention of following proper protocols, do you? Oh, I'll follow them, Commander. I'll just interpret them, creatively. She pulled out her data pad, already making notes. Now, about those 12 units. I'm thinking we need specialists. Crash is great for frontline combat, but we need engineers, scouts, maybe a couple designated for boarding actions. You are going to give them different roles? I asked, fascinated despite myself. Why not? They are not identical anymore. 7 came back from that fight, each one damaged differently, each one having experienced unique combat situations. Their processors will have adapted, learned. I can work with that, enhance their individual strengths, rather than forcing them into identical molds. Over the next 6 weeks, the warehouse transformed from a graveyard into something resembling a workshop, a laboratory, and occasionally a war zone. Mendez did not just repair drones. She rebuilt them from the ground up, each one customized for specific tactical roles. Crash remained the primary combat unit, but now sported upgraded armor plating, salvaged from a decommissioned coalition cruiser, and a weapon system that made our ordnance officers very nervous. Mendez had somehow convinced them to provide her with prototype plasma accelerators, then modified those accelerators in ways that definitely violated several weapons treaties. It is not technically a war crime if we only use them on raiders, she explained when I questioned this. Besides, the Vraxians certainly are not worried about treaties. Unit 5 became Whisper, a scout configuration with enhanced sensors and stealth plating. Unit 8, now called Breaker, specialized in close-quarters combat and boarding actions, equipped with cutting tools that could slice through ship hulls like paper. Unit 12, Sentinel focused on defensive operations and electronic warfare. And on it went. 12 unique combat platforms, each one illegal by about 17 different regulations, each one terrifyingly effective. But the real innovation was not in the hardware. It was in the software. They are learning from each other, I observed one day, watching the drones run combat simulations, sharing tactical data in real time. More than that, Mendez pointed to her monitor, showing streams of data flowing between the units. They are developing what humans call a hive mind. Not true collective consciousness, but shared awareness. When one drone identifies a threat, all of them know about it instantly. When one discovers an effective tactic, the others can implement it within seconds. That sounds dangerous, I said carefully. It absolutely is. If someone hacked into their network, they could compromise the entire force at once. She grinned at me. Good thing I spent 3 years studying cyber warfare defense protocols. Their network uses quantum encryption that cycles every 0.001 seconds. You would need processing power equivalent to a small star to crack it. You are insane. Yeah, probably. But I am also right. Watch this. She activated a new simulation, one that replicated the Vraxian attack on Station 17, but with worse odds. 20 battlecruisers, 200 fighters, and coordinated bombardment patterns. The 12 drones deployed. I expected them to be overwhelmed in minutes. Instead, they won. Not easily. Not without losses. 3 units were destroyed in the simulation. 2 more damaged beyond immediate repair. But they won. 12 jury-rigged, technically obsolete drones defeated a force that should have crushed them. How? I breathed. Because they do not think like coalition forces. They do not wait for orders. Do not follow predetermined tactics. Do not limit themselves to approved strategies. Mendez replayed a section where Breaker had rammed a battlecruiser's engine port, while Crash provided covering fire from inside an asteroid. They adapt. They improvise. They do whatever it takes to win. I did not program that into them. That is just what happens when you build something that refuses to quit. The combat trials began 2 weeks later, and Admiral Corthan brought observers from 7 different species, all of them eager to see the humans' latest insanity fail spectacularly. They were disappointed. The first trial involved target practice against simulated enemy fighters. Standard procedure required an 80% hit rate at medium range. The drones achieved 97% at extended range while performing evasive maneuvers. Whisper hit 100%, which should have been impossible given its damaged optics. "Explain this," demanded Corthan, reviewing the data. Mendez shrugged. Whisper compensates for optical damage by using electromagnetic sensing and predictive algorithms. It cannot see perfectly, but it can predict where targets will be better than most organic pilots. Works just as well. The second trial tested durability. The drones were subjected to simulated combat damage, environmental hazards, and system failures. Coalition standards required continued operation after losing 30% of combat capability. The drones kept fighting after losing 70%. Unit 4 just had its primary processor destroyed, a technician reported in disbelief. It is now running on backup systems and still maintaining combat effectiveness. "That should not be possible," Corthan muttered. "Your engineers built these things with 17 redundant systems because they were terrified of failure," Mendez explained. "I just taught the drones how to use all 17 at once, instead of sequentially. They are messy, inefficient, and burn through power like crazy, but they do not stop." The third trial was full combat simulation. The drones versus a mock Vraxian raiding force with live ammunition and actual damage potential. Every observer expected this to end badly. It ended in 4 minutes. The attacking force never had a chance. The drones moved like they had rehearsed this dance for years, covering each other, exploiting weaknesses, turning the enemy's own tactics against them. When it was over, every simulated enemy unit was destroyed, and the drones stood among the wreckage, waiting for new orders. Admiral Corthan was silent for a very long time. "How many of these units can you produce?" he asked finally. Mendez did not hesitate. "With proper resources and support crew, I can have 50 operational within 3 months, 200 within a year. They will not all be as sophisticated as these 12, but they will all be functional, combat-ready, and absolutely relentless. And if the Vraxians adapt to these tactics, then I adapt the drones. Sir, this is not a fixed solution. This is an ongoing process. The drones learn. I learn. We all learn together. That is the advantage. Coalition forces train to a standard and then stop. These things never stop improving." Corthan looked at the drones, then at Mendez, then at me. "Commander Veltrax, your honest assessment. Can we trust this technology?" I thought about my people, about the 12 Quilorians who had died in that supply convoy attack, about all the others who would die if we kept pretending our current methods were sufficient. "Admiral, I trust Lieutenant Mendez. More importantly, I trust that she builds things that work when they are needed most. Is that not what we require?" He nodded slowly. "Very well. Full authorization for expanded production. Lieutenant, you will have your resources. But understand this. You are now responsible for these machines. If they fail, if they malfunction, if they harm Coalition personnel, it falls on you." "Understood, sir. I accept full responsibility." Mendez stood straighter. "You will not regret this." "I already regret this," Corthan said dryly. "But I regret dead soldiers more." Dismissed. The Vraxians returned 4 months later with a vengeance. Intelligence reports suggested they had been gathering strength, preparing for a massive assault that would capture not just Station 17, but 3 neighboring outposts simultaneously. They brought 12 battle cruisers, 400 fighters, and something new: boarding pods filled with Vraxian shock troops. They expected easy prey. They found 43 combat drones waiting for them. I watched from the command center as Mendez coordinated the defense. She had refused a formal command position, insisting she was just an engineer, but everyone knew who was really running this operation. "Crash, take your squad and engage the Northern Battlecruiser Group. Breaker, those boarding pods are yours. Whisper, I need sensor data on their flagship. Find me a weakness." She spoke quickly, calmly, like she was ordering coffee rather than orchestrating a battle. The drones responded instantly, launching from the station in precise formations that immediately dissolved into chaos the moment combat began. But it was organized chaos, purposeful chaos, the kind that only looked random to those who did not understand the underlying coordination. "Boarding pod impact on Sector 7, a technician shouted. "Breaker's already there," Mendez replied, pulling up the feed. We watched as Breaker tore through the boarding pod's hull, its cutting tools making short work of the armored exterior. Vraxian shock troops poured out, only to face a combat drone that had been specifically designed for exactly this scenario. The fight lasted 18 seconds. "Enemy flagship is charging main weapons," another voice called out. "Targeting the station." Whisper found their reactor coolant system, Mendez said. "Crash, you seeing this?" "Affirmative, boss. Firing solution calculated. Engaging now." The flagship's main weapon never fired. Crash's squad put 3 plasma accelerator rounds directly into the coolant ports, causing a cascade failure that disabled the entire ship's weapon systems. The battlecruiser did not explode, but it might as well have. Dead in space, unable to fight, it became a liability to its own fleet. The battle raged for 37 minutes. Longer than the first engagement, bloodier, more desperate. The Vraxians adapted, focused fire on individual drones, tried to overwhelm them with numbers. They destroyed 8 units, damaged 15 more, but they lost. Badly. When the surviving Vraxian forces retreated, they left behind 6 destroyed battlecruisers, 212 fighters, and 17 boarding pods. Station 17 had taken minor damage to outer shields. No Coalition personnel were killed. The drones returned home, battered but functional, already analyzing the battle data and identifying improvements for next time. Mendez walked among them in the warehouse, checking damage, offering quiet words of encouragement to machines that theoretically could not appreciate such things. But I had noticed something over the months. The drones responded to her differently than they did to anyone else. Small adjustments in posture, slightly faster response times, an indefinable something that suggested they cared what she thought. "You gave them more than just functionality," I said quietly. "You gave them purpose." She smiled, tired but satisfied. "I gave them what my brother never had: equipment that does not quit, friends who watch their backs, a reason to keep fighting." She patted Crash's armored shoulder. "They are good soldiers, better than they were ever supposed to be. The Coalition will want more now, many more. I know. I have already submitted designs for Mark 8 units, faster, tougher, smarter. Should be ready for production in 6 months." She looked at me seriously. "But I need help. I cannot build an army alone. I need engineers who understand what I am trying to do. People who are not afraid to break some rules for the right reasons. You want me to recruit for you? I want you to help me build something that matters. The Coalition is good at making things that look impressive. Let us make things that actually protect people. What do you say, Commander? Want to join the crazy human in her impossible project?" I thought about it for approximately 0.5 seconds. "When do we start?" 3 years later, the Vraxian raiders were no longer a problem. Neither were the Krellian pirates, the Sithak's border incursions, or any of the dozens of other threats that had plagued Coalition space for decades. The Mark 7 program, officially renamed the Adaptive Combat Drone Initiative, had expanded to 2,000 units spread across 40 stations and 12 mobile fleets. Mendez had been promoted to captain and given command of the entire program. I served as her second, managing the production facilities and training new engineers in the art of making impossible things work. But we never forgot where it started. In the warehouse on Station 17, one stubborn human stood in front of a broken drone and refused to accept that broken meant useless. They had given her garbage. She had turned it into salvation. And that, I learned, was the most human thing possible. Taking what others had given up on, seeing potential where others saw only failure, and building something beautiful from the wreckage. The Coalition called it innovation. Mendez called it stubbornness. I called it hope. And in the cold mathematics of galactic warfare, hope turned out to be the most powerful weapon of all.